The fluorescent lights of the courtroom hummed, casting a sterile, almost clinical glow on the scene before me. Across the aisle, Theron, my soon-to-be ex-husband, sat there with a smirk playing on his lips, a look of smug victory etched deep onto his face. His lawyer, a sharp-suited man with an overly confident posture, had just finished delivering his closing statement, masterfully painting a picture of Theron as the wrong party, the incredibly successful businessman burdened by a wife who, in his narrative, contributed absolutely nothing. He even had the sheer audacity to suggest that my demands were not just excessive but a blatant attempt to unfairly leverage Theron's hard-earned success for my own gain. I could almost feel the silent cheer radiating from his side of the gallery, composed mostly of his business associates and a few distant relatives. They believed his narrative, swallowed his lies, hook, line, and sinker. They saw a woman, quiet and seemingly passive, being put firmly in her place, a predictable outcome for someone like me. But I wasn't just observing that moment, I was savoring it, every single second. I felt a profound sense of calm, a quiet certainty that vibrated deep within my bones, a counterpoint to the nervous energy buzzing around the room. My gaze met his for a fleeting second, and I offered him the smallest, most imperceptible smile. It wasn't a smile of defeat, nor was it one of anger or malice. It was a smile of absolute, unassailable knowledge, a silent promise that the game he thought he was winning was about to be flipped entirely on its head, turned inside out in a way he couldn't even begin to imagine. He didn't see it, of course. His ego was a thick, impenetrable blindfold, his arrogance a deafening roar in his own ears, drowning out any hint of reality. He saw only my stillness, my quiet demeanor, and he fatally mistook it for surrender. He truly believed he had already won, that he had reduced me, Elara, to a mere footnote in his grand, self-congratulatory narrative. He believed I was utterly oblivious to the true extent of his deceit, his betrayals, his reckless financial gambles. Oh, how profoundly wrong he was. I knew every single card in his hand, every trick up his sleeve, and I had been meticulously stacking the deck against him for a very, very long time. To truly understand that pivotal moment in court, you have to understand the decade-long journey that meticulously led me there. I am Elara, 36 years old, and for the better part of a decade, my entire life revolved around Theron. When we first met, I was a budding interior designer, fresh out of university, bursting with innovative, creative ideas and a keen, almost obsessive eye for detail. Theron, then 28, was an ambitious, charismatic go-getter, just starting his tech venture, full of big dreams and even bigger promises. He saw my potential, or so he incessantly told me, repeatedly encouraging my dreams, my artistic vision. But as his company rapidly grew, his demands grew with it, insidiously consuming my time and energy. He needed someone to manage his increasingly chaotic schedule, to host his networking events, to meticulously curate his public image as the successful, dependable entrepreneur. He needed a stable home, a sanctuary while he conquered the world, or at least his corner of it. And I, madly, foolishly in love, and perhaps more than a little naive, stepped into that all-encompassing role willingly, believing it was for us. I put my interior design passion on indefinite hold, telling myself it was just a temporary pause, a necessary sacrifice for our glorious future, a shared dream that was increasingly becoming his alone. I managed our sprawling home, curated his ever-expanding social circle, became his unofficial personal assistant, his tireless sounding board, his silent partner in every sense of the word. I meticulously organized his convoluted expenses, balanced his often chaotic books, and even helped him conceptualize some of his most critical product presentations. My analytical mind always finding practical solutions where his boundless enthusiasm sometimes overlooked crucial practicalities. His towering success, which he so loudly and singularly attributed to his unique genius, was in truth built on a sprawling foundation of my unseen labor, countless late nights spent ensuring everything ran smoothly, ensuring he looked impeccably prepared, ensuring his deals went off without a hitch. My fingerprints were all over his empire, yet he never once acknowledged them. Over time, the charming, ambitious man I married began to fade, slowly but irrevocably replaced by someone increasingly arrogant, dismissive, and utterly self-absorbed. My substantial contributions became my wifely duties, my insightful ideas were reduced to cute little notions, and my very presence was slowly but surely taken for granted, reduced to mere background noise. The financial decisions, once a topic of shared discussion and collaboration, became unilateral decrees handed down from his high perch. He started making increasingly risky, often ill-advised investments without so much as a second thought or a consultation with me. I'd see strange, unexplained transactions, large sums of money moving in and out of accounts I didn't fully understand, accounts he had gradually made less accessible to me. When I questioned him, even gently, he'd dismiss my legitimate concerns with a condescending chuckle, that infuriating sound assuring me, "Darling, these are complex matters. Leave the finances to me, you wouldn't understand." He even started subtly devaluing our joint assets, suggesting certain funds were business-related and therefore solely his domain, not to be questioned. The affair, when I finally discovered it, wasn't a sudden, shattering blow as one might expect, not a dramatic revelation that left me in tears or consumed by rage. It was merely the final, predictable piece of a deeply disturbing puzzle I had been unwittingly assembling for years, a confirmation of a truth I already knew in my gut. The late nights, the vague, increasingly flimsy excuses, the sudden, inexplicable preoccupation with his appearance. They were all clichés, yes, but they were his clichés, played out with an almost embarrassing lack of originality. I found out by accident, an innocuous notification on a shared cloud account, a photo he had forgotten to delete from a business trip, a tender message meant for someone else entirely. It confirmed my long-held suspicions about a junior partner at his firm, a woman he often praised for her dedication and understanding in a way that always made my skin crawl. My initial reaction, surprisingly, wasn't tears or furious outburst. It was a cold, quiet, almost surgical sense of clarity. This wasn't just about infidelity, it was about betrayal on multiple, profound levels, a deep-seated disrespect for the decade I had poured into him, into us. It was a clear, undeniable sign that the man I married was gone, replaced by a hollow echo of ambition and self-interest, a ghost of the man I once knew. And it was at that very moment, sitting alone in our pristine, soulless living room, a room I had meticulously designed with love and painstaking attention to detail, only for it to become a monument to his neglect and my unspoken sacrifices, that my secret weapon truly began to take definitive shape. My weapon wasn't an elaborate scheme for public humiliation or emotional warfare. It was far more potent, far more precise, knowledge. For years I had quietly, almost invisibly, managed our personal finances, observed his business dealings from the periphery, and, crucially, I possessed an eidetic memory for intricate details and a natural, intuitive aptitude for recognizing complex patterns. I remembered every casual comment he'd made about a new venture, every obscure tax document I'd signed without truly understanding its full implications, every time he'd asked me to, "Just sign here, darling, it's routine. Don't worry your pretty little head about it." That night, the night of discovery, I started to connect every single one of those seemingly disparate dots. I remembered the prenuptial agreement we had signed, a document Theron had dismissed with a wave of his hand as a mere formality. "Just something my lawyers insist on, Elara. Don't worry your pretty head about it, it's boilerplate." He'd laughed it off, barely glancing at the clauses, never reading a single word beyond the first page. But I had read every single word, every dry legal phrase. And deep within its dense legal jargon, I knew there were specific, potent clauses I had barely registered at the time, that spoke with surprising clarity to spousal contributions to business growth, to fair division in cases of financial mismanagement, and crucially, to the severe consequences of material misrepresentation. Quietly, meticulously, I began to gather undeniable evidence, piece by painstaking piece. I used my wifely duty as an impenetrable cover. I organized his sprawling digital files, backed up financial statements to secure locations, cross-referenced every bank account transaction, and tracked every unusual expenditure. I discovered hidden assets he thought were invisible, shell companies existing only on paper, and an alarming number of high-risk investments he had made using funds that were, by marital law, partly mine. I realized his proclaimed genius was often nothing more than reckless, unbridled gambling, and his much-vaunted success was built on a dangerously unstable financial house of cards, constantly on the verge of collapse. My calm exterior became my greatest camouflage. The more I smiled, the more I supported him publicly at events, the more he underestimated me. He saw meekness, I carefully cultivated invisibility. I wasn't just documenting his affair. I was systematically dissecting his entire financial empire, piece by agonizing piece, understanding its vulnerabilities and preparing, with unnerving calm, to exploit them all. With the affair undeniably confirmed and my suspicions about his increasingly precarious financial maneuvers solidifying into concrete proof, my plan moved seamlessly from preparation to execution. The silence that had always been a part of my nature, often mistaken for passivity, transformed into a potent, strategic tool. Theron, utterly mistaking my quiet demeanor for ignorance or profound despair, became even more brazen in his actions, more careless in his deceptions. He spent more time away from home, offered flimsier, more transparent excuses, and dedicated less and less attention to our shared life, which by then was barely shared at all. He spoke endlessly of new, ambitious ventures, always vaguely, always with grandiose promises of future, unimaginable wealth. He saw me as a fixed point, an unmoving shadow in his life, utterly unaware of the tectonic shifts happening beneath my feet, shifts I was orchestrating. While he flaunted his affair and recklessly gambled with what remained of our shared future, I worked relentlessly. Every late night he spent with his mistress, I spent translating complex financial jargon into easily digestible summaries, cross-referencing obscure legal precedents with his specific transactions, and meticulously organizing a comprehensive, unassailable database of his misdeeds. My innate analytical ability, once channeled into interior design aesthetics and structural integrity, found a new, far darker purpose in dissecting his financial labyrinth. I discovered a clear, damning pattern of him moving significant sums of money, often millions, between various accounts, some of which were offshore, often just before major business deals or large personal expenses. These transactions frequently coincided with periods when his company's public financial reports seemed slightly inflated. A subtle red flag I now recognized as a potential form of financial manipulation designed to fraudulently attract unsuspecting investors. I also meticulously documented every single instance where he had leveraged shared assets without my explicit knowledge or proper legal documentation, particularly concerning his high-risk tech investments, often using our home as collateral for his speculative ventures. The prenup, which he had scoffed at so casually, which he proudly claimed to have signed without even reading, became my Bible, my sacred text. I highlighted every clause, every subsection, that addressed financial transparency, spousal contribution to business valuation, and the precise distribution of assets in the event of dishonesty or material breach of trust. His lawyer had drafted it, yes, but he had also failed to explain its full, devastating implications to a client who clearly hadn't bothered to read a single word. I, however, had studied it until I knew it backward and forward, identifying the precise legal levers I could pull, the exact pressure points that would dismantle his empire. My conversations with him remained outwardly serene, almost unnervingly calm. I would nod, smile, and offer seemingly innocuous questions about his day, questions that were, in fact, carefully crafted probes designed to elicit specific details I could cross-reference with my growing dossier. How was that meeting with the new investors, dear? Did they like the proposal for the new blockchain venture? I would ask, already knowing from a stray email or an unusual bank transfer what that blockchain venture truly entailed: a highly speculative, unregistered investment in a questionable startup he was backing personally, using funds that should have been jointly managed, funds he had assured me were safe. He would dismiss me with a casual wave of his hand. Just business, Elara, nothing for you to worry about, darling. And I would smile, because every dismissal was another perfectly cut brick in the impenetrable wall I was building around him, a wall from which there would be no escape. He was so arrogant, so utterly convinced of my perceived weakness, that he openly discussed his brilliant financial schemes on the phone while I was in the very same room, assuming I was too engrossed in a book or too busy planning dinner to comprehend the complex, damning implications of his words. He even left sensitive documents carelessly out on his desk, confident I wouldn't touch them, that I wouldn't understand them if I did. This casual disregard for my intellect, this profound, fatal underestimation of my capabilities, was his ultimate, unforgivable flaw. He believed his charisma and his superficial success shielded him from any accountability, and he believed I was far too insignificant, too quiet, too meek to pose any challenge whatsoever. He saw my silence as approval, my calm as ignorance. He was preparing to walk into court, utterly convinced that he held all the cards, that he was about to deliver the final crushing blow, to dispose of me like an inconvenient accessory. He had no idea I was about to show him the hand he never knew I was holding, a hand that would utterly destroy his carefully constructed world. The air in the courtroom crackled with an almost palpable anticipation as my lawyer, a sharp, understated woman I had chosen specifically for her meticulous approach and ruthless precision, rose to present our case. Theron still looked supremely smug, occasionally glancing at me with a faintly pitying, almost condescending expression, convinced I was a lost cause. He expected a boilerplate rebuttal, perhaps some emotional, desperate pleas that would only serve to highlight his victimhood. He was about to be profoundly, utterly disappointed. Your Honor, my lawyer began, her voice clear, steady, and devoid of any unnecessary theatrics. The petitioner, Ms. Elara Vance, has presented a compelling case for a fair and equitable division of marital assets, based on a decade of unacknowledged contribution. However, our extensive discovery process has uncovered evidence that not only overwhelmingly supports Ms. Vance's claims but also reveals a deeper, more disturbing pattern of pervasive financial deception and blatant marital misconduct on the part of Mr. Theron Hayes. Theron's smirk faltered slightly, barely perceptible at first, but it was there. His lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently into his ear, a look of growing concern on his face. But it was already too late. The train had left the station. My lawyer then began, calmly, methodically, to lay out the evidence I had spent months, years, meticulously collecting, organizing, and cross-referencing. She presented beautifully organized spreadsheets, not just of jointly held marital assets, but of undocumented transfers, hidden offshore accounts, and highly speculative investments Theron had made, often with vast sums of funds directly diverted from what should have been jointly held or legitimately invested in his public business. She showed precise dates, exact amounts, and the names of beneficiaries, cross-referencing them expertly with his publicly declared income and corporate filings, exposing every inconsistency. The numbers didn't lie, they screamed the truth. They painted a devastating picture of a man who had systematically, deliberately siphoned off substantial portions of marital wealth into high-risk, often legally dubious, ventures, all while presenting a meticulously crafted facade of consistent, responsible growth to me, to his investors, and to the public. Then came the prenup, the document he had so carelessly dismissed. Furthermore, Your Honor, my lawyer continued, her voice gaining a subtle but firm edge, we would like to draw the court's specific attention to Article 7, Section C, of the prenuptial agreement signed by both parties on file. This highly relevant clause specifically addresses the equitable distribution of assets in cases where one party has engaged in material misrepresentation or actively concealed financial information. She then projected the relevant section onto a large screen, its dry legal text looming large, clear enough for everyone in the courtroom to read every damning word. Theron's face, which had been slowly draining of color throughout the presentation, now turned a horrifying, sickly ashen gray. He had never read that clause. He had dismissed it, laughed it off, confident that as long as I didn't know, it simply didn't matter. My lawyer then pulled out the ultimate trump card, the final, undeniable piece of the puzzle that would shatter his carefully constructed reputation. And finally, Your Honor, while typically not directly relevant to financial division alone, the petitioner feels it is vitally important to demonstrate a profound, ongoing pattern of marital dishonesty that fundamentally underpins the respondent's financial recklessness and deceit. We have undeniable proof of Mr. Hayes' long-term affair with Ms. Olivia Chen, a junior partner at his firm. This includes a detailed, time-stamped timeline of their communication, verifiable travel records, and irrefutable photographic evidence, which we believe illustrates a broader character of deceit that extends directly to his financial dealings and his contractual obligations. A collective gasp rippled audibly through the courtroom. Theron visibly flinched, as if struck by an invisible blow. The color completely drained from his face, leaving it a sickly, terrified gray. His eyes darted wildly to his lawyer, then back to me, then frantically to the floor, searching for an escape route that wasn't there. The image of the vacation photo on the shared cloud, the one he had forgotten to delete, the one that had started it all, flashed brightly in my mind. He had been so incredibly careless, so arrogantly overconfident. My lawyer concluded succinctly, given the substantial, undeniable evidence of financial concealment, the deliberate breach of the prenuptial agreement's trust clauses, and the clear pattern of profound marital deceit, we respectfully request that the court award Ms. Vance not only a full and equitable division of all identifiable marital assets, including those previously concealed, but also a significant, controlling portion of Mr. Hayes' personal business holdings as explicitly stipulated by the prenuptial agreement regarding spousal contribution to business growth, especially considering the severe depreciation of value due to his reckless and undisclosed investments. She wasn't just asking for the house or the joint accounts. She was asking for his company, his lifeblood, the very thing he valued above all else, the empire he had built on my back. The judge, who had maintained a stoic, impassive expression throughout the entire presentation, now nodded slowly, his gaze fixed piercingly on the stunned, crumpled figure of Theron. Theron's eyes finally met mine across the silent room. The arrogant smugness was gone, completely obliterated, replaced by pure, unadulterated horror and a dawning, terrible realization. It was then in that precise, agonizing moment that he finally realized the full, catastrophic extent of his miscalculation. He realized I had known everything, every single sordid detail, and that I had meticulously, silently, orchestrated his complete downfall, brick by painful brick. He had walked blindly into a trap, a meticulous, inescapable trap set by the quiet woman he had so thoroughly, so fatally underestimated. The judge's gavel fell with a decisive, echoing thud, reverberating through the stunned silence that followed my lawyer's devastating presentation. The verdict was swift, crystal clear, and utterly devastating for Theron. Based on the overwhelming and meticulously presented evidence, particularly the ironclad clauses of the prenuptial agreement he had so negligently dismissed, the ruling came down firmly, irrefutably in my favor. Not only was I awarded the full value of all jointly acquired marital assets, including the house's insignificant investment accounts he had so brazenly attempted to hide, but the court also recognized my decade-long, invaluable contribution in silent labor to the growth of his business, a contribution that had been explicitly, if dismissively, acknowledged in his own prenup. The judge, citing Theron's flagrant disregard for marital transparency and contractual obligations, ordered a substantial transfer of his company's shares to me, effectively granting me a controlling interest in the very business he had so proudly built on a foundation of lies and my unacknowledged efforts. The financial manipulations, though stopping short of being deemed criminal, were severe enough and so clearly detailed to warrant a punitive division under the strict terms of the agreement. Theron, who had been listening with a look of growing disbelief that bordered on catatonia, let out a choked, guttural sound, like a wounded animal. His face crumpled instantaneously. The arrogant self-assurance that had defined him for so long vanished completely, replaced by a raw, pathetic desperation. He looked around the courtroom, his eyes wide and unfocused, as if searching frantically for an escape that simply wasn't there. His lawyer, pale and utterly defeated, just shook his head slowly, a silent acknowledgement of the unassailable, meticulously constructed case I had built. I watched him. A decade of invisible work, of suppressed dreams, of quiet endurance, of his casual cruelty, flashed before my eyes in vivid detail. The man who had dismissed my intellect, who had so callously betrayed my trust, who had taken my sacrifices for granted, was now utterly exposed, stripped bare of his carefully constructed facade, his brittle ego shattered into a million pieces. His shoulders began to heave uncontrollably, and then slowly, silently at first, the tears started to flow, hot and ugly. He tried desperately to stifle them, to maintain some shred of dignity in front of his peers, but it was useless. They poured down his face, marking the complete and irreversible collapse of his entire world. His business associates, who had moments ago been silently cheering him on, now looked away, embarrassed and profoundly uncomfortable, distancing themselves from the train wreck. The mistress, Olivia, who had been sitting a few rows back, had quietly, opportunistically, slipped out of the courtroom even before the final ruling was delivered, her loyalty clearly as fleeting and transactional as Theron's integrity. The agonizing realization that he had lost everything, his company, his wealth, his reputation, and the woman who had quietly held his chaotic world together for a decade, hit him with the brutal force of a physical blow. He cried not out of remorse for his actions, I knew, not a single tear of true regret, but out of the sheer, agonizing pain of personal loss in the public humiliation of his utter defeat. As the proceedings concluded, he looked at me again, his eyes red and swollen, brimming with a potent mix of fury and despair. I met his gaze directly, and this time my smile was no longer imperceptible. It was clear, calm, and utterly devoid of triumph or malice, yet brimming with the quiet, profound satisfaction of justice meticulously served. I had given him every opportunity to be a good man, to be honest, to be a true partner. He had chosen deceit, arrogance, and casual cruelty, and in that moment he bore the full, crushing weight of those irrevocable choices. It has been 18 months since that day in court, 18 months since Theron cried, and I smiled. The dust has settled, and the landscape of my life, once defined by his overwhelming shadow, has been completely transformed, reborn. The house, our house, is now truly mine. I've thoroughly renovated it, not for show, not for his approval, but purely for myself, infusing every room with the creative vision I had suppressed for so long, every color and texture a testament to my own identity. It no longer feels like a monument to his neglect but a vibrant, living testament to my rekindled passion and autonomy. The significant, controlling stake I acquired in Theron's company was a strategic move, not an act of immediate, petty vengeance. I didn't want to run it myself, but I needed to ensure its stability to protect the immense value of my newly acquired assets. I meticulously brought in a new management team, ethical and highly competent professionals who began the long, arduous process of untangling Theron's financial mess and painstakingly restoring the company's shattered reputation in the market. Slowly but surely it is stabilizing and my investment is proving sound, a testament to what honest leadership can achieve. This hard-won financial independence has given me the ultimate freedom to finally pursue my interior design career, not as a suppressed hobby or a fleeting dream, but as a full-fledged professional enterprise. I've launched my own boutique design firm, specializing in bespoke, sustainable spaces that speak to intention and harmony, and the response from clients has been overwhelmingly positive, even inspiring. My analytical mind, once focused on dissecting Theron's flaws and lies, now sculpts beauty, functionality, and efficiency into tangible spaces. Theron predictably struggled immensely. Stripped of his company's control and much of his personal wealth, he found himself back where he started, but without the crucial benefit of my hidden support, my silent labor, or his youthful energy and charm. His reputation in the industry was utterly shattered by the devastating revelations in court, a public record that followed him everywhere. The brilliant entrepreneur was exposed for what he truly was, a reckless, dishonest operator, a house of cards. I hear whispers through mutual acquaintances. He's working odd jobs, trying desperately to rebuild, but the arrogance that once fueled his ambition now only serves to isolate him further, pushing away any potential help. The financial lessons he stubbornly refused to learn the easy way are now being taught to him by life itself, with harsh, unyielding, and utterly unforgiving force. Looking back, I realized the true power wasn't in the anger or the immediate, emotional retribution I might have craved early on. It was in the quiet, meticulous observation, the methodical, patient planning, and the unwavering belief in my own intelligence and capabilities, even when others, especially Theron, so carelessly dismissed and invalidated them. The greatest victories are often won not with loud declarations or dramatic outbursts, but with strategic silence, with relentless, unyielding preparation, and with the quiet strength of knowing exactly what you're doing. I learned that underestimating a quiet person, someone who keenly observes far more than they speak, is a profound and often irreversible mistake. True strength isn't always loud or flashy. Sometimes it's a calm, knowing smile in the face of perceived defeat, a silent testament to the fact that you know a secret the other person can't even begin to fathom. So if there's one invaluable lesson I could share, it's this: never mistake quiet for weakness and always pay attention to the details. Because sometimes the most unassuming person holds the key to the entire game, and they're just waiting for the perfect moment to play it.